The Home Grounds by Mrs. Schuyler Van Rensselaer. Coffee Break Collection 33. Gardening. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. The Home Grounds. The union, a happy marriage it should be, between the house beautiful and the ground near it, says a recent English writer, is worthy of more thought than it has had in the past, and the best ways of effecting that union artistically should interest men more and more as our cities grow larger and our lovely English landscape shrinks back from them. This writer is an enthusiast for natural gardening methods, so we are not surprised to find that in speaking of the ground near a country house, he should say little about harmonizing it with the house itself, but much about uniting it agreeably with the landscape beyond its own borders. He calls this ground the garden, which is its right old-fashioned name. But in America, at least, garden is most generally understood as meaning very small grounds, or an enclosure of some sort where plants are grown chiefly for the sake of their own individual beauties. And so with us, home grounds is a better term when we want to speak more broadly. Speaking then of all the grounds near the house, this Englishman explains that there are situations, as on the hillsides of Italy, where the character of the spot prescribes a formal, semi-artificial kind of treatment. But, he continues, the lawn is the heart of the true English garden, and as essential as the terrace is to the gardens on the steep hills. And, in general, these words are true for America as well. In fact, there is less need in America than in England to protest against the making of formal gardens where naturalistic lawns with appropriate framings and backgrounds of foliage should exist. It would be difficult to discover any American homes where, on level ground, the terrace walls cut off the view of the landscape from the house, and, on the other hand, the house from the landscape. Nevertheless, there are certain errors in garden design into which we are as apt to fall as the English, and we should be doubly anxious to avoid them, for it seems our architects are succeeding better than the English in creating that house beautiful which must be the center of the complex ultimate picture. If the taste of the writer whom I quote can be trusted, most of the houses built in our time in England are so bad that even the best garden could not save them from contempt; while, although we often build bad houses too, many of our country homes are so very good that we think with a pang how much better yet they would be were their home grounds properly planned and planted. How to plan and plant such grounds is a most interesting question, although, of course, varying with each individual case, it cannot be approached theoretically except in a very general way. Let us, however, suppose that a house has been advantageously placed and attractively designed, that it looks out upon a beautiful landscape, and that the intervening space is of such extent and character that it can be made an harmonious link between house and landscape, giving the house a fitting environment when it is seen from a distance, and the landscape a fitting foreground when it is seen from the house. The two questions then are, how to plant and what to plant. As regards the former, one cannot answer theoretically except by saying that there should, if possible, be a wide extent of lawn or lawns to give repose and unity to the picture, with surrounding plantations, varied in mass and skyline, to enframe the lawns and connect them with the landscape. That open outlook should be left, but not too generously, for the contemplation of the most beautiful parts of the background. That all disagreeable objects should be carefully masked from sight, and that roads and walks should be as few and inconspicuous as convenience will allow. If a good landscape gardener is employed, these arrangements will be planned and their preliminary portions will be executed without much trouble to the owner. But in settling the question what to plant in completing them, the landscape gardener, in America, as in England, sometimes seems as much in need of guidance as the owner, and even when his ideas are entirely right, the owner too often interferes with their execution or adds inharmonious details of his own as the years go by. Our English author is partially correct when he says that most people who care for gardens, still taking the word in the wide sense he gives it, suppose that they are made for plants, and that, if a garden has any use, it is to measure for us beautiful flowers, trees, and shrubs. But this idea of a garden's function is much too narrow. The home grounds form, beyond question, a place where beautiful plants should be fostered. But they should also form an entity, a composition, a picture which will be beautiful as a whole and in harmony with its surroundings. And, however well planned, such a composition, such a natural picture, may be shorn of beauty and rendered painfully artificial if its elements, big or small, are injudiciously selected. Our Englishman's decision is that the true use and first reason of the home grounds is to keep and grow for us plants not in our woods, and mostly from other countries than our own. But this, it seems to me, is a very mistaken decision. I quote it simply because so many American gardeners and amateurs consciously or instinctively adopt it, and, so doing, usually spoil the home grounds which they are anxious to adorn. The true use and first purpose of the home grounds is to grow for us beautiful plants of such a kind that their right association will make a beautiful whole, beautifully in keeping with the house on the one hand and with the outer landscape on the other. In fitting them for this purpose, we are at liberty to get our trees, shrubs, and flowers where we will, provided we introduce none which, by a discordant note, will mar that general effect which must be determined by soil, situation, and climate, and by the character of the house and of the local landscape. To be harmonious, and therefore beautiful, grounds over which we see the Berkshire Hills or the valley of the Hudson must evidently be American gardens, just as those in the valley of the Thames must be English, and those on the southern shore of France must have the mixed, semi-tropical character peculiar to the Mediterranean coast. To secure this local character, local plants are essential as a foundation. And then, to give variety, interest, and the true garden-like air and charm, exotics should be mingled with them. But these exotics should never be chosen for their rarity or novelty alone, or even for their intrinsic beauty, and still less, as is too commonly the case, should they be chosen for their mere conspicuousness. First of all, they should harmonize with the other plants about them, and therefore the novice may well hesitate before dipping deeply into those stores of foreign plants which are now so vast and varied and accessible. His choice will not be narrow, if in addition to native plants he selects such as have come from lands with climates akin to our own. In using these last he will be following nature's own example. Here in America she does not confine herself to growing plants which were originally American. She takes up vegetable immigrants as hospitably as our civilization takes up human immigrants, and assimilates them as quickly and naturally. Who would suspect the white willow or the barberry in New England, or the parlonia in the woods of Maryland to be an exotic, or the field daisy which fills all our meadows? And who sees anything inharmonious or strange in the aspect of the ailanthus trees which, mingling with native elms, shade the rustic streets of Nantucket? Nature chooses which exotics she will grow for what we may call scientific reasons, but the artistic effect of her results is invariably good, and man should learn from her how to make a similar choice, taking a wider liberty, of course, when he is planning a garden than when he is planning a forest, but never forgetting that, in gardens such as we have now in mind, he should grow together only such plants as will look well together. There are exotic flowers which look as natural, as appropriate in a garden as the marguerite of Europe looks in our fields, but there are others which seem entirely out of place as parts of an American garden if it has any design, any character at all. I do not mean to disparage the cultivation of rare or novel or conspicuous plants, whether native or exotic. It is a delightful task to collect plants for their own sakes, without any reference to their relation with the surrounding scenery. But collections should be arranged on spots specially set apart for them, where they will not injure the main picture formed by the general environment of the house and the encircling landscape. As regards the grounds, the garden, in its wider sense, they will assuredly be most beautiful, interesting, and enjoyable when both native and foreign plants have been used in tasteful combination. But, if confined to one of these classes, it would be much worse to choose plants not in our woods and fields, and mostly from countries not our own, than to choose our own. Using native plants alone, one would miss 1,000 chances to secure a delightful variety. But using the others alone, there would be the certainty of an inharmonious whole, a garden filled with beautiful plants which would not be a beautiful garden, or an appropriate environment for the house, or a suitable foreground for the outer landscape of American forest, hill, and stream. I do not know that I should say so confidently that a planter may be very chary in his use of exotic plants, or even dispense with them altogether, were I writing in England. Our country is incomparably richer in forms of vegetation than is any European land, and especially in those larger forms which are the planter's chief reliance when he works on an extensive scale. To say this, we need not match our whole big fatherland against a smaller European one, or even against the whole of Europe. When the first explorers landed, when no seeds had been sown here but those of nature's sowing, these Atlantic and Middle States would have seemed very rich if matched against all of Europe. Were the Englishman of today confined to his woods and fields, deprived of what ours have sent him, he would be poor indeed. But did we appreciate the half of our treasury, we should see how little we really need Europe or Asia or Africa to help us to furnish forth our works of landscape art. Yet, although we do not actually need them, their help is very welcome if we take it in proper fashion. We should add other things to ours without overwhelming ours, and thus selling our birthright of individuality for what, alas, too often proves a mess of motley herbage. And we should call upon Europe and Eastern Asia, akin in climate to our Eastern America, rather than upon the tropics, and those other lands where vegetable types have developed in harmony with natural conditions that are not our own. We want American gardens, American landscapes, American parks and pleasure grounds, not the features of those of a dozen different countries huddled together into a scene which has no simplicity, harmony, or unity, and therefore no character, no likeness to nature, and therefore no artistic work. End of The Home Grounds,